Welcome to Ecclesia Principles, a biblical strategy for believers to engage in God's design for government with Ray Eppard.
Hello, glad you could join us again today. We're continuing to talk about the balance between self-government and centralization. This is something that we have to understand if we're going to have good government and how we need to pursue that. Now, we've addressed the problems and the blessings of centralization. Power gravitates toward money. Money gravitates towards power. Centralization frequently happens to create greater efficiencies, greater profit margins, and just to create a greater production of whatever it is that is looking to be produced. In the founding of our country, the 13 colonies became more centralized. They came together as the United States in order to be more effective and more efficient at fighting England and winning the Revolutionary War. That was the purpose there. Centralization grows out of those dynamics. Now, the only counterbalance to it is self-government. If centralization is allowed to continue to grow, then it will become oppressive to the people. And whoever's at the top, whether it's an individual or a group of people, whoever's at the top of the centralization, they will end up being oppressive to the rest of the people, thinking they're smarter than everyone else, thinking they know what's best for everyone else, and having the power to implement it, unless it's counterbalanced by self-government. And with this, a key dynamic, and it is a biblical principle, we've got to understand that there are things that, again, the no establishment of religion, that has to do with liberty within our nation. But biblically speaking, there is a true and living God, and the Bible is the truth of God. And with it, we can see where certain things apply to how government functions. And with this, we've used this week Romans 7:23. He says, "But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members." Now, yesterday I referenced the fact that sin nature works against the law of the mind, that even a person can understand this is probably not good, but that sin nature can push them, well, we're going to give it a try. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie with Jim Carrey, Dumb and Dumber. You know, and there's a line in there that says, "So you mean there's a chance?" And if you would, that sin nature will war against the law of the mind, and it'll say, but there's a chance. And people will go with it. Now, notice the next part that happens in this verse. "And bringing me into captivity." The law of sin, that sin nature, doesn't care about captivity. That sin nature doesn't care that it even makes you a captive. So if that sin nature doesn't care if I'm a captive, will that sin nature in me care if you're a captive? No. That's why people can do some of the cruel things that they do, is because they have yielded to that sin nature. If you would, that's the reason we have to have good self-government, is because that sin nature will produce destruction in our lives and the lives of others unless we have good self-government. We have to promote good self-government. The problem is when you have people at the top of centralization that haven't necessarily managed their sin nature, that it is still driving them and pushing them. And if you would, our founding fathers, when they established this nation, again, the first move towards centralization was the Declaration of Independence. then the Articles of Confederation, which were not strong enough, and then they went to the current Constitution, which was the highest level of centralization that they adopted. But with that, they adopted the 10 amendments, the first 10 amendments known as the Bill of Rights, because they understood if you increase centralization, you have to increase self-government. You have to increase the understanding and the rights and the power of self-government to maintain a balance if you're not going to have a society that is oppressed. Those have to stay balanced, and that's our ecclesia principle, balancing self-government and centralization. Now, the Second Amendment, I want to look at the Second Amendment because we're talking this week about what do we do? Centralization is growing because, very much like the Industrial Revolution, our technology revolution that is taking place is driving centralization to a degree that we've never seen before, at a pace that we've never seen before. And it's creating issues and concerns that we have never seen before. You know, one of the new things that's out there that even some of those that have been involved in the design of it, and I'm talking about AI, artificial intelligence, it is reaching a point that some of them have backed off and said, this is dangerous. But there are people still pushing it. And, you know, at that point you say, well, why would they still be pushing it? Well, why did we study COVID-19? Why did we give it to a nation that is basically our enemy to study with us, or to study for us? In all reality is what we were having them do. It wasn't legal for us to do it, so we let them do it. And why did we give that to them? And it's well documented that it came from us. And why do we do that? Because the sin nature is pushing against the law of the mind. Things that would, you'd go, why in the world? The sin nature is pushing people. And very often that power, ability, wealth, those are the things that drive against the law of the mind. And it doesn't matter if it brings us into captivity. It doesn't matter if it shuts down the world for a couple of years. It doesn't matter. Can we move up in higher influence and control? But the Second Amendment, I want to look at that today. It says a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now again, notice it says a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. They're not talking about squirrel hunting. They're not talking about rabbit hunting. Not talking about deer hunting or putting food on the table. It's talking about that for the people to be free, they need the right to bear arms. And with that is very much under attack in our society today. The Second Amendment of the right to bear arms is coming under attack from every angle that it could possibly be attacked. But the bottom line is the Second Amendment is in place really to protect the people from the government. Now, I will tell you something that I was shocked that this didn't create more reaction than it did. Or maybe it did and the media just didn't cover it, because very often that's the case. But when there was some talk about, you know, the Second Amendment and the assault rifles, and the President of the United States made a statement in essence saying, what good are those going to do when we have F-15s? Wow. That was President Joe Biden talking about what good is your guns going to do you when we have military planes. That to me was a shock that any president would use those kind of terms. In other words, it was it was one of the biggest forms of bullying I have ever seen in the White House. It just that, what are you going to do? We got F-15s. In other words, that statement was a shot over the bow, as they say. It was a warning shot. Listen, we got enough stuff to make you do whatever we want you to do. And you need to understand that. That is what that statement was saying. And the fact that so few people spoke out against that comment coming from a sitting president was just unreal to me. And you see, if you would, it's that kind of talk is why the people need the right to bear arms. Because that sin nature that's in a human can cause them to think that everybody would really be better off if I told everybody what to do. Because, you know, I'm really smart. I know what I'm doing, and these people are a bunch of idiots. And you've heard a number of politicians in recent years and how they speak about the population. They speak very disparagingly about the population. Again, this should be a warning sign to you that there is a growing number of people over here in this centralization that thinks that you really shouldn't be allowed to control your own life because you're actually not that bright. We know better than you. And we need to be able to dictate to you. And I'll just throw something out to you to be on the lookout for. If you start hearing the phrase 15-minute cities, 15-minute cities, look for that. For lack of a better phrase, that's kind of a prep for the next pandemic. Now, it's under the guise of, and they're doing it in Europe right now, where everything you need is within a 15-minute walk, and making sure that, you know, a pharmacy, a grocery store, any necessities are within that 15 minutes, a 15-minute city. That way everybody can have what they need within 15 minutes. Well, they're developing in parts of Europe these 15-minute cities, but guess what they're also doing at the same time? They're implementing some of the devices that the Chinese have developed in tracking people, QR codes and certain things that will be able to identify whether or not you have left your 15-minute city area. Because that way, you know, if we have to lock you down, then we need to be able to tell if you're leaving your permitted area. We're going to make sure you got what you need. You don't need to go anywhere. And so we'll just tell you to do this. And so the world, very much of the elite, those in the centralization, are doing more and more to prepare the populace for being controlled. Call me a nut if you want to. But the bottom line, just listen for that term, 15-minute city. And be looking out for things that will track where you go. It's happening in Europe, and so many people here want to follow every step Europe takes. We have to keep self-government balancing out centralization. God bless you. See you tomorrow.